सामुंडी का मतलब है समुद्र में जिंदगी बसर करने वाले। समुद्र में सफर करने से उनका सामुंडी नाम पड़ा और ये देश से परदेश में कारोबार करने से उनका वणजारा नाम पड़ा। तो बिटाई ने कहा वणजारा कह दिया, सामुंडी कह दिया। और वणजारियाँ जो है उनकी औरतें जो पीछे रही कि उनकी इंतज़ार करती है 6 महीने के लिए, 12 महीने के लिए। कोई लंका श्रीलंका के तरफ, कोई अफ्रीका के तरफ गया, कोई बसरा इराक के तरफ गया। और इसमें जिसको समुद्र ने कश्ती डूब गई वो हमेशा के लिए चले गए। और इनकी जो उदासी वणजारियों को, समुद्र का सफर है, अगर जिंदा आया या समुद्र ने खपा दिया।
से जो हरदी ओ जे सनड़े सफर हलिया परियायल करयाकी अल्लाह मुखे चाढ़े जी मुखे चाढ़े वणजारो ओ हरे।
तो बिटाई ने ये दोनों बयान इस दुनिया का और इस दुनिया से जो गया उनका, ये सब सामुंडी के सफर में बयान डाला हुआ। सुर सामुंडी की जो मिसालें हैं वो पहले ज़माने में जो, अभी ज़माने में तो स्टीमरें चल रही हैं, पहले ज़माने में जो लकड़े के किश्तियाँ चलती थी उसमें भी इंजन नहीं था, वो भी कपड़े के पर्दे से सिर से चलती थी। बिटाई ने ज़्यादातर उन्हीं का बयान किया। जो वणजारियाँ पीछे रह जाती हैं, किसी वणजारे की माँ, किसी की बहू, किसी की बहन, किसी, ये सारे जो जुदाइयाँ हैं, वणजारों से वणजारियाँ जुदा होती हैं, तो उनका बिटाई ने बयान किया।
जो सुर उसका देखते हैं, अभी जो सामुंडी की बात कर रहे थे
जी,
ये भी एक कमाल का उसका जो है वो सुर है।
हाँ।
सर निसरिया पांध उत्तर लगा आओ करी, यानी ये जो सर घास एक होता है हमारे पास, वो बेम्बू की तरह होता है, वो भी अभी यानी तैयार होके अपनी मस्ती में है।
हाँ।
और ये उत्तर की जो हवाएं हैं वो भी चली है। सर निसरिया पांध उत्तर लगा आओ करी, मुंह तो कारण कांध सह सह सुखाऊं कहीं। यानी इससे पहले भी हम तेरे ऊपर जो है वो अल्लाह के खैरात कर चुके हैं काफी दफा कि आप आ जाएं। अभी जब आओगे तो पता नहीं क्या होगा। अल्लोलन न दे वर विधाई वजह के। यार आप कैफियत का अंदाजा लगाएं उसकी। नई फर्ज करो शादी हुई है, अभी उसका पूरा काफिला जा रहा है। वो शिकार पे जब जाते हैं समंदर के अंदर रोजगार की खातर, तो उनका पूरा एक काफिला होता है, सारे यार दोस्त होते हैं। अल्लोलन न दे वर विधाई वजह के, क्योंकि वो जो बहुत बड़े भेड़े होते हैं उनको बांध के रस्सियों के साथ काबू कर देता है। जब जाना होता है तब जाके खोलते हैं। अल्लोलन न दे यानी उनको खोलने नहीं दे रही है, वो ज्यादा उसको बांधने की कोशिश कर रही है। रो अजो की रातड़ी लालण मुंह लाए, यानी एक रात सिर्फ मेरे लिए आप रुक जाओ। रह अजो की रातड़ी लालण मुंह लाए, वंज म फोड़ा आए तू एडे सफर से परी। क्योंकि इतना बड़ा सफर है, 2-3 माह आपको लग जाते हैं, फिर तूफान है, फिर मवासलात का तो उसी टाइम में कोई होता नहीं था, काफी भेड़े जो है वो आते ही नहीं थे। तो ये एक अजीब कैफियत है यार, ये मैं तो उसको लफ्जों में बयान नहीं कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन उसका असर हमारे ऊपर है। तो उसी असर के हिसाब से चल रहे हैं।
अल्लाह माधर पाय मुंदे वाला रोआ आयल रोआ चीचल रोआ हाय हाय रोआ।
बात ये है कि बात हम लतीफ पे कर रहे हैं, तो लतीफ जो है ना वो एक बड़ा एक फिक्र का नाम है। मैं समझता हूँ कि उसका राग और उसकी जो शायरी है उसमें इतना बड़ा एक दर्द है, इतनी बड़ी गहराई है। अगर सोचोगे जैसे एक बीज होता है, बहुत एक छोटा सा होता है बीज, जेब में डाल दो तो मेरे ख्याल में पता नहीं कितना जो है ना वो आ जाएगा। लेकिन वो एक बीज जब हम जमीन पे लगाते हैं, जब उसका फिर दरखत होता है, इस तरह लतीफ के एक एक शेर के पीछे एक बड़ा समझो कि दरखत है, एक कंप्लीट, यानी उसका जो है ना वो एक फिक्र है। ये एक फिक्र है, ये इंसान में खुद में होता है जो महसूस करता है। बाकी तो लोग काफी ऐसे घूम रहे हैं महसूस ही नहीं करते हैं। मौसीकी को या सुर को या लतीफ को कोई पहचान ही उनके पास नहीं है। पर मैं समझता हूँ जिसको इस चीज का पता चल गया, उसके फिक्र का और उसके सुर का, वो फिर जाके इंसान होता है।
सामुंडी पे शार भिटाई ने तो काम किया है। आज का सामुंडी हम कैसे देखते हैं ये भी बड़ा अहम है। हम सिंध के अंदर आज के सामुंडी को हम उनसे जोड़ते हैं जो यहाँ से छोड़ के इंडिया गए। नगर पार करने में बहुत सारे ऐसे लोगों से मैं मिला हूँ। अच्छा। जो जिनके लोग बिछड़ के इंडिया चले गए नगर पार कर से, आई थिंक जोधपुर के थ्रू और फिर स्प्रेड हुए। तो वो कहते हैं कि वो तो अपनी चीजें सामान हमारे पास रख के गए, ठीक है। और वो कह रहे थे उनको ये थोड़ी पता था कि ये बंद हो रहा है। उन्होंने कहा ये फिलहाल फसाद शुरू हो गए, ये गोले और मिसाइल आ रहे हैं। हाँ। ये हम जरा जाते हैं यहाँ से, तो हम जरा आते हैं, ये सामान रखिए। बाप रे। ये घर संभालिएगा। एक ने कहानी मुझे बताई, वो बूढ़ा था। हाँ। 100 से करीब वो मुसलमान था। तो बता रहा था कि ये भी सामुंड से बहुत मिलता जुलता है। वो कह रहा है कि वो मेरा जो दोस्त था वो डॉक्टर था, मेरे पास बहुत सारा सोना रखेगा, बहुत सोना रखेगा। वो चला गया। अच्छा। और उसने कहा कि ये तुम रखो, मैं आऊंगा। तो उसने कहा तब मैं था सिर्फ 22-23 साल उम्र होगी, अब वो 100 में था। कह रहा है मैंने और मेरी बीवी ने पूरा घर खोदा, वी डिग आउट, तब हमारे बच्चे नहीं हुए थे। घर खोद के हमने वो दफन किया सोना उतर, और हम फिर इंतजार करने लगे ये कब आएगा। और ना मैंने अपने बेटों से बात की, क्योंकि मैंने कहा ये मेरे बेटे, हो सकता है मुझे मार दे सोने के लिए।
करेक्ट
ना मैंने किसी और से बात की, और वो राज में रहा, और मेरी बीवी मर गई, राजदान एक थी। अब वो कहने लगा कि मैं बिल्कुल बुढ़ा, ना सही से सुन सकूं ना सही से बोल सकूं, मेरे बच्चे हो गए, मैं बूढ़ा हो गया, और मैं मरने तक हो गया, वो तो आया ही नहीं। फिर उसके बेटे की बेटी आई, ठीक है। अब वो आई है हिंदुस्तान से लड़की, उसने अपने बाप से ली सारी एड्रेस कि मैं सिंध जाऊंगी। तो वो आई, सिंध आई, और मेरे पास आके बैठी, और वो मेरे हाथ चूमने लगी, मुझे प्यार करने लगी, क्योंकि मैं उसके दादा का दोस्त था, और हम तो उस दौर में बड़े भाइयों की तरह थे। तो मैंने उससे सारी बातों में कुछ दिन जब रही हमारे घर पे ही, मैंने उससे पूछा कि तुम्हारे दादा हैं? उसने कहा नहीं, वो तो चले गए जिंदगी से। तो कह रहा तुम्हारे बाप? कह रहे हाँ वो है। तो उसने कहा उसकी क्या उम्र होगी? उसने बताया वो भी 60-70 के आगे हैं, या जो भी एज थी, मुझे ठीक से याद नहीं है। तो उसने कहा तुम अपने बाप से राब्ता कर सकती हो? उसने कहा हाँ जी, अपने बाप से कहो कि जो उसका बाप था मेरे पास एक सांप छोड़ के गया है।
अच्छा।
हाँ, और वो सांप किसी को भी डस सकता है। वो मैं बहुत बार उसके डसने से बचा हूं, मेरी बीवी भी उसके डसने से बहुत बार बची पर मर गई। अब वो सांप, इससे पहले अगर किसी को खबर लग गई कि सांप है यहाँ पे, तो फिर लोग सांप को मारने आते हैं, फिर वो डसेगा या वो सांप को मारेंगे, कुछ ना कुछ ऐसा होगा। तो तुम उससे कहो कि तुम्हारा बाप सांप लेके गया है, वो यहाँ से लेके जा, रख के गया है, वो लेके जा। उसकी बेटी ने अपने बाप को बताया, उसके सारे इंडिजिनस फोक विजडम वाले लोग थे। उसका बाप समझ गया ये क्या बात कर रहा है।
अच्छा।
And then this transfer thing happened. It was
My
golden.
God.
शेख अयास ने वाई लिखी थी, टिड़ी पौंदा टारी है, टिड़ी पौंदा टारी है, जॾहिं गाढ़ा गुल तॾहिं मिलंदासीं।
टिड़ी पवंदा तारीए, जॾहिं गाढ़ा गुल अलोम्या, तॾहिं मिलंदासीं। ओ तॾहिं मिलंदासीं।
ये जो डालियां हैं, टारी है जिसे, जब उस पे फूल खिलेंगे और वो टिड़े कहते हैं खुलने को, वो जब मुस्कुरा के खुलेंगी,
हाँ।
जब धरती फर्टाइल होगी, और टेक्निकली जब हमारी सोच फर्टाइल होगी, यहाँ से जब हमारे दिमाग के अंदर फर्टिलिटी होगी, जब हमारे इधर वो गुलाब प्यार के खिलेंगे, हम तब मिलेंगे।
वाह।
टिड़ी पवंदा तारीए, जॾहिं गाढ़ा गुल अलोम्या, तॾहिं मिलंदासीं। ओ तॾहिं मिलंदासीं।
और फर्टाइल धरती होती है जब उस धरती को ख्याल करने वाला होता है, जो उसका हारी होता है, जो उसका माली होता है, जो उसका ख्याल करता है, वही उसको फर्टाइल करता है, और वही उसमें दरख्त उगाता है, वही उसमें फूल उगाता है।
अल्लाह जान है वरंदियों कूंजड़ियों।
कूंज बड़ा ही हसास बर्ड है। मैंने सुना है फोकलोर्स के अंदर एक गुलाम फरीद की शायरी की लाइन में कोट कर रहा हूँ कि गुलाम फरीदा में ईवे रोवा जीवे विछड़ी कूंज कतारा।
वाह।
मैंने खुद से विटनेस किया, बट देयर इज अ लोर, कि जब वो बिछड़ जाती हैं अपनी कतार से जो उड़ रही होती हैं जिस डायरेक्शन में, द मोमेंट दे जब बिछड़ती हैं उससे, तो दे लीव देमसेल्व्स, दे फॉल एंड दे डाई। सो आई हैव हर्ड इट। और ये बर्ड इतना सेंसिटिव है कि जब तक यहाँ सब कुछ सही नहीं होगा तब तक वो नहीं आएगा यहाँ पे। तो जब जने वरन यूं कूंजड़ियों, जब वो कूंज लौटेगी हर हर कर रहे हुल हलो में, वो बहुत आवाजें करेंगी, हुल करेंगी, उनका पता चल जाएगा कि सब दुरुस्त हो गया तरह मिलना से।
वाह।
So beautifully, very symbolic.
अल्लाह जान है वरंदियों कूंजड़ियों। हर हर करे, हर हर करे उल्ले अलोम्या तदही मिलंदा सी। ओ तदही मिलंदा सी।
विछोड़े जा दीहड़ा भौराई अजी भूल अलाला, है ना?
भोराई अजीब बोल रहा है। मुझे इस भोराई का वर्ड की एग्जैक्ट मीनिंग पता नहीं है।
भोलेपन।
Probably.
मैंने ऐसे सुना या समझा
अच्छा।
कि वे मेरे भोलेपन की भूल थी,
हम्म।
हमारा बिछड़ना मेरी नादानी थी,
Yes.
मेरी मिस्टेक थी, मेरा भोलापन था कि हम बिछड़े, मैं समझ नहीं पाई या पाया।
Beautiful. Yes.
तो जब वो एहसास होगा कि वो भूल थी,
Yes.
तब हम मिलेंगे।
Yes. So it's all जब सब चीजें heal होंगी, you're mentally, emotionally, by all means, when you are healed and you have a sense of realization, तब मिलेंगे।
और ये कितनी अजीब बात है कि हम ये बात कर रहे हैं जब आपके और हमारे दरमियान इतनी बड़ी सरहद है।
ओ तदही मिलंदा सी। मिलंदा सी। ओ तदही मिलंदा सी। ओ तदही मिलंदा सी। ओ तदही मिलंदा सी। ओ तदही मिलंदा सी।
We bring to you another episode in our Doorway to Sindh webinar series brought to you by Sindhi Culture Foundation and the Embassy Group, providing you a glimpse of Sindhi history and culture. I am Aruna Madnani, a proud Sindhi.
Hello, everybody. I'm thrilled to introduce our esteemed speakers. I would like to welcome Dr. Rita Kothari. Dr. Rita Kothari is a name you are most likely to come across if you are as curious as me to learn about Sindhi culture. Dr. Kothari holds a PhD in literary studies and translations and has authored several books on translation, Gujarati literature, and Sindhi culture, such as Multilingual Nation, Translation and Language Dynamics in India, Decentering Translation Studies, The Burden of Refuge, and my favorite, Unbordered Memories, Partition Stories from Sindh. Dr. Kothari has won Distinguished Author Award, Wani Foundation and Jaipur, and Bookmark from Jaipur, a residency by Sangam House, Bangalore, Upin and Shruti Shah Chair Professor, IIT Gandhinagar, among many more distinguished awards and fellowships. Dr. Kothari is currently a professor in the Department of English at Ashoka University. Dr. Kothari, I welcome you. Shabnam Veermani initiated the Kabir Project, Journeys, in 2002, and has since been exploring the philosophy of Kabir and other mystics through a deep engagement with their oral folk traditions. Her inspiration and joy in this poetry and its wisdom has taken the shape of documentary films and a digital archive, singing and performing, translations and curations, urban festivals and rural yatras, and more. Recently, infecting students with the challenge and wonder of mystic poetry. All this as part of her work at the Kabir Project in Shrishti, Bangalore. She has worked on two books, I Saw Myself, Journeys with Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, and Burn Down Your House, Life Lessons from Kabir. The work of the Kabir Project, housed at Srishti, Bangalore, was given the Sadbhavna Award for contributing to interfaith understanding by Sri Murari Bapu and Vishwagram Trust in Gujarat in 2016. I welcome you, Shabnam Veermani.
Thank you.
Prashant Parvataneni from Kabir Project lives in Bangalore and works as a teacher, writer, and researcher, traveling between cinema, art, and literature. He was awarded the Srinivas Rayaprol Poetry Prize in 2009, and his writings have appeared in the Bombay Literary Magazine, Nether Quarterly, and Seminar, among others. Currently, he's working with the Kabir Project on an archive of mystic poetry and songs. Prashant Parvataneni, I welcome you, and I invite Dr. Kothari, Shabnam, and Prashant to please carry forward the conversation.
Thank you so much, Shiksha. And I am quite delighted to get this opportunity to chat with Rita and Prashant in a freewheeling, informal manner. I think we decided that it would be good for us to start with a short introduction to Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, since many of our viewers may not have heard of him or know him too intimately. Shah Latif was a turn of the century Sindhi poet, 17th, 18th century, but he lived and wrote bulk of his poetry in the 18th century in Sindh. He's such a vast entity. I'm just going to signal two or three very striking things about the voice of Shah Latif as a Sufi. One, that he's not only a Sufi poet, he's really, in true respects, a folk poet equally, because Shah Latif's oeuvre kind of unfolds an incredible detail, a kind of Sindhiyat, both in incredible detail in terms of the physical topographies of Sindh, because Shah Latif was a person who himself traveled in great degree with and lived and hung out with local communities, whether they were blacksmiths or fishermen or traders or weavers. And so you find a lot of the land where he traveled, all of Sindh, Rajasthan, parts of Rajasthan and Gujarat, reflected in his oeuvre, in his Shajo Risalo. So, ek tarah se there is a and he speaks through the voices of these women who were part of these epic love legends, folk love legends. Sasipunnu, Sohini Mahiwal, and others. So he speaks distinctly in a woman's voice, which makes him also special. And so he evokes topographies that are both physical, metaphysical, socio-political. He's drawing on historical events of his time period and reflecting them in his poetry. And his Risalo, which is a collected works of Shah Latif, is sort of peopled almost in an epic manner with countless narratives, stories, kirdar, characters, situations, all of which he lovingly describes in great detail for a delight in their particularity and location, and at the same time for their allegorical meanings. So his poetry functions on many, many levels and can be received, understood, and enjoyed at many levels. It's said famously about Shah Latif that once he was asked, "Aap Shia hai ke Sunni?" And he said, "I'm in between the two." So the person said, "Par Sai, there is nothing in between the two." He said, "Precisely, I'm nothing." So while we celebrate Shah Latif as a Sindhi poet, we must also always celebrate him as a Sufi who will always have in balance a delight in particularity and an eye towards the dissolution of that particularity in favor of something that holds all those many particulars. Okay, so let me also say that Shah jo Resalo means treatise or message. Uh, his works are divided into surs. Surs could be understood as clusters of poems or chapters. They're also indicative of certain musical modes in which he sang this poetry himself. He was a musician and sang this poetry on his dhamburo and is credited with having created the Vai form of music and poetry. So there are all these stories and moods that are clustered in these surs. And the film Don't Fall in Love with Those Who Wander in Boats starts out by evoking a very specific sur, which is Sur Samundi, perhaps a less known sur compared with his other more epic stories of Sassi and Sohini and others. So, Rita, maybe I'll ask you to speak a little bit about how you understood Sur Samudi. What did you find striking or interesting about it?
I'll somewhat actually add, Shabnam, to the fantastic introduction that you've already given to Shah Abdul Latif. But I can also sympathize with the fact that it is very difficult actually to introduce Shah Abdul Latif. How do you actually grasp and articulate a living person, a living tradition, a presence that is constantly there in the lives of people? So whether people talk about betrayals in marriages or betrayal of children or the lack of rains or the excess of rains, people in Kutch and Sindh will invoke Shah Abdul Latif. Now, that particular quality is very difficult actually to convey, to communicate to someone who doesn't know. My response to the question about Sur Samundi also lies somewhere in this phenomenon, which is that what actually makes Shah Abdul Latif such a living presence, that this is not abstract Sufi philosophy we are encountering. What we are actually encountering is a range, a gamut of narratives and of stories, and stories that work at multiple levels. I mean, you could spend a lifetime trying to unravel it and still go away knowing that you are somewhere bewildered and that it hasn't actually resolved for you. This particular quality which obtains in, for instance, all the famous surs that you mentioned already, Shabnam, I would not have associated Sur Samundi with those. I would not have associated Sur Samundi as something that works at these multiple levels, and it is clearly not, as you rightly said, it is one of the lesser known surs. However, after kind of revisiting once again Sur Samundi with greater attention this time, and also thinking about the film, I feel like it has actually opened up for me one more door. It's quite appropriate that this entire program that Aruna and her colleagues have put together is Doorway to Sindh, because the doors keep opening. And what is that door really? The topography that you mentioned, Shabnam, in while talking about Shah Abdul Latif, the fine ecological details that also the Risalo will gives us. For instance, people will talk about a particular quality kind of grass or a leaf or a flower or a tree that the Risalo mentions. That is which makes the Risalo sort of trenchantly, tenaciously attached to a landscape and to a region, right? And it makes it very, very iconic of Sindhiyat. And yet, even in that very sort of trenchantly regional text, so to speak, Shah Abdul Latif actually opens up a new kind of cosmopolitanism through Sur Samundi. What he does is that he shows you that regions are not these static categories, that regions are also made through the ebbs and flows of people, that people go in and out. And these wanderings that happen of people who go in and out, in this particular case, Shah Sahib illustrates that with the sailors from Sindh, the seafarers from Sindh. He shows you that these are sailors going away, for instance, come Diwali time, and they are ready to unfurl their sail. Their wives wait there. They are sorry to let their husbands go. They remind their husbands that you are chasing that gold in Sri Lanka, but do you realize that our lifetime will go away by the time you are back? What Shah Sahib does there is to actually unfurl for us a very important part of the history of Sindh. Now, when you look at, for instance, South Asian merchant networks worldwide, you will realize that the biggest network and one of the most sort of enduring, long-standing networks has been that of the Sindhi community. So the Sindhi Bhatiyas from Thatta, for instance, the Sindhwarkis from Hyderabad, the Shikarpuri traders, all these have been trading both maritime and inland trade for centuries. Claude Markowitz has a very good study on this, where he basically talks about global merchants, and he talks about the Hyderabadi Sindhwarkis who would take various things from Sindh to sell to other places and bring certain other things in exchange. So for instance, the reference to Sri Lanka that Sur Samundi has, Sri Lanka was very well known for gems and pearls that people would bring from there. So whether it was spices or pearls or money or gold, what we realize is that through the centuries, and not only when the British came, when actually the British get involved in this region, you find a lot of Sindhi traders who become part of the big opium trade that used to run through Marwad and Rajputana. And at some point, the Sindhis are very involved in it. And a lot of wealth actually that you see amongst the Sindhis in places like Bombay and Bangalore actually goes back to the opium trade of that particular period. So what Shah Sahib is doing in this particular Risalo is moving away from the kind of epic love stories that we have in some of the other surs and dastans, but instead he gives us a very, very historic and an economic aspect of the history of Sindh.
The idea of the ocean and the naya or the boat. And I was just thinking about it this morning. Being land creatures, I think we are given to the delusion of stability as human beings, because we stand on terra firma. Everything seems firm and stable. And I think not just for Shah Latif, for Kabir and plenty of other Sufi and Bhakti poets, the ocean has become a metaphor for the true nature of reality, because it is constantly in flux. It cannot be held down. It is continuously tossing you, surprising you, moving you. So the ocean becomes a metaphor for life itself, for the nature of reality, because contrary to our attempts to fix it, it keeps eluding being fixed. In Kabir's poetry, it's often called Bhav Sagar, and in other spiritual traditions, the ocean of becoming. Kabir will famously speak about the self as the wave that rises from the ocean, takes shape in a particular form, but is no different from the ocean. Um, and that it will soon set, and you have that one moment where you arc up into the sky in the form of something particular before you return to the vastness of which you are a part, actually. So this conundrum of being both the wave and the ocean at the same time is what the ocean unfolds for you as a grand metaphor. um, Also, so many other images, the idea of trying to get across in the boat of the body self. And there are so many references in Shalatif. So Kabir, like Shalatif, will express this vulnerability. In fact, I think Shalatif expresses vulnerability far better than Kabir does. I think that's also why I find Shalatif so close to one's heart in some ways, because he will evoke the pain of loss. Because when things are in flux, everything that you are clinging to is getting lost. In Samundi, he is evoking the women who are left behind when their beloveds take to the sea in their boats for trading, as Rita, you pointed out. And the pain of that separation, the humanness of that fabric of experience. I would say Kabir is sometimes a little harsher. He'll say, Mamta ne maar, bhasam kar pivana. He'll say, kill all your attachments. Mamta as in attachments, not as in mother's love. Just burn them away and drink the ashes. He'll say. So he's very harsh at moments, though also vulnerable. And now, even as I'm speaking, I'm thinking of Shalatif in say Ramkali saying, "Jete bhaiye jogi thyan, to tama chhad tamam." He's going to tell you. So Shalat himself is capable of being very harsh and very shaking you up and saying, give up all your attachments, give up all your clinging to the shore, give up all this pining and Hai Mira. But then also there is Sur Samudi and the beauty of that expression where he will let himself feel the 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 bittersweet nature of being human and being in this world and loving and losing all the time. So in that sense, Sur Samundi, it's very tender, it's very soft.
I was also thinking the grief, grief leaves this huge gaping hole. And I think that Shah Abdul Latif gets really well.
Prashant, come in.
I was just thinking, when I sometimes think about poetry, and I think, why do people write poetry? Why is it? What is so special about this? And one of the things is that in poetry, you don't speak the way you speak in daily common speech. Right? You find words. You sort of find new ways of speaking. And because you cannot speak the common speech in poetry, you cannot write just how you speak. I feel like it also allows you to speak the unspeakable things, the things which the dailiness of our lives don't allow us to sit and wallow in, almost in that sense. And one of the things that sets Shalatif so apart is how uninhibited as a poet he is to actually be sentimental. It's a quality that I think we are losing more and more. It's the quality which I think we are more afraid of. We are much more guarded about, wearing our emotions on the sleeve. But at least in the poetic universe, there is this vastness and the allowance to really feel intense things and express in no less an intense and dramatic manner, almost in fact melodramatic manner. And there's a lot of scorn today about melodrama and all of that, but there's so much value, because one of the things that melodrama does beautifully, as we were speaking about Shalatif, is that it connects personal grief which is happening inside you and just projects it out into the world, its topography, its people, its environment, atmosphere, waves, sea, everything starts to just glimmer with that emotion.
And that's what is so stunning in when you read verse after verse to intensify that quality, that that here is the moment, here is the space and time for all of this to be acknowledged and felt and to be lived through. And I think that's something that is so beautiful in terms of just listening to Shalateep's poetry. And it's so amazing that it happens in this manner. Uh,
Yeah, and I think this idea of separation, biraha, is such a pan subcontinental idea.
yeah,
It's not just in Shah Latif,
yeah,
though I would say Shah Latif's Risalo is replete with, if there was one emotion one could flag in the Shahjo Risalo, it would be this pain of separation from one's beloved, right? But it is not certainly unique to Shah Latif. It is in Kabir, it is in Baul poetry. I mean, it is beyond the Bhakti tradition. It is a
yes,
wider trope.
yeah,
And it's super powerful because it plugs into our lived experience, like the poetry begins to read almost like a palimpsest,
mm,
where there are many layers. At the surface layer, almost you could read it as, though by surface I don't want to demean, I don't mean it like satehi surface. It's a very important layer.
yeah,
You read it as love poetry, you read it as separation from your earthly beloved.
mm,
And it's really important because it is the predominant experience of humankind, this loss of separation from your earthly beloved. But then it also speaks in such moving ways to dislocations and separations caused by socio-political histories. It speaks to the idea of migrant labor in our country. It speaks to the idea of partition, as Saif so beautifully um, evokes in the film. The idea of a contemporary Sur Samudi, for him speaking to the idea of the separation between two groups of people who were one and then get separated from each other through partition. And it equally speaks to us at a spiritual, metaphysical level, because we are, in a sense, asunder from some source. As you know, Marui, uh, also in Marui's legend, that's how Shah Latif evokes this idea of being uh,
oh,
of yearning for origins of some kind, which are geographic as well, but also spiritual. Um, a sense of what Kabir refers to as Mansarovar, and in fact, so does Shah Latif. This space, which is or Malir in the case of Marui, a kind of a homeland, a space from where you came, which was pure, uncluttered by divisive politics of being, the trauma of taking shape and beginning to form attachments and then losing them. So the yearning for a wholeness, a completeness, a return to a place where you no longer feel you are sundered, you are incomplete. So that completion, which could also be understood as being separated from your own true self. So then that's how all these love legends loop back so beautifully. In each and every love legend, at one point, the woman who is pining for the beloved discovers that she herself is the beloved.
yeah,
Satsi will say she is Punnu. She has discovered that she is Punnu herself. So this idea of separation, and separation from what, operates on multiple levels simultaneously, and is such a primal nature of our experience, that I think that's what comes through also poignantly in Samudi.
yeah.
I also think of it as incompleteness. That's an existential situation
Yeah.
for all of us, right?
There's almost as if there's an estrangement with the self in that sense, and that's the separation that is constantly sort of troubling us.
Yeah.
And even this duality, as you said so nicely, Shabnam, that in all love stories, the one who's pining and the one who's away have to merge at some point, either in realization that we are no different, or almost literally like drowning in the same river, or getting submerged in the same place, and that kind of thing. And even here, I think the Sur Samundi, it's a very evocative thing that somebody is standing at the shore and waiting still, and there's somebody else who is rocking in the waves continuously, wandering. And it almost feels like, we feel like we are often in these two states in life as well, that we are either wandering restlessly, or we are feeling a deep stasis and desire to perhaps either move or find some other experience. And living between these states is almost feels like the entirety of our existence, this constant tussle between wandering and waiting. And it's very funny because almost like how it happens with like how Saif tells the story of partition in the film. There is a deep longing and sadness and grief in the hearts of those who have left their homelands and are right now scattered and wandering, perhaps. And there is also a deep grief with those who are waiting, and or perhaps still, while they're
Left
still
behind.
at home. Yeah, while they're at home, that the home itself is made strange because the beloved has left. So what use is this home, perhaps? I don't know. There seems to be a trauma on between, at least I can understand this at the level of lovers and beloveds and friends, where any kind of displacement and dislocation completely makes the world strange for both, whether you're wandering or whether you're waiting. And that's something that is so uniquely thing about love, where it almost makes you strange. But then in that strangeness, you also recognize the truth of existence, which is perpetually strange. Like, it's a constant state of alienation. And I think only in love we come face to face with that truth, that you have to live with this, or you have to work with this estrangement, perhaps, an alienation.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm listening to you, Prashant, and I'm thinking of these two visuals of the men who are sailing and the women who are left behind.
Yeah.
And the women who are standing on the shore. And I'm thinking, at one level, of course, it is quite gendered in the sense that it is men who have mobility and women who don't. At another level, it's really both are in a state of some limbo or some transition.
Yes.
So to be on the shore is also a kind of liminal sort of a zone.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is, I think, something deeper he's getting at in this sur. I was also thinking earlier when Shabnam was talking about partition, going from what Saif says in the film, the Sindhis of India, and I'm referring here by and large to the post-partition Sindhis, they are also torn asunder from that history. Like, for instance, when we think of a rich person or a rich family, I remember my parents' generation or my grandparents' generation would say, "Machi mani wala manu hai," कि वो लोग मच्छी मानी खाते हैं. और अगर कोई modest हो, थोड़ा बहुत गरीब हो या कुछ निम्न वर्ग का हो, तो then they would say, दाल रोटी वाले लोग हैं. So the fact that the machi is a big part of idiomatic usage in the Sindhi language, clearly that has to do with the fact that these were people, right, who were living along the waters of Indus, and they had a very living relationship. And nowhere do you get that feeling. Shabnam mentioned how we are in the terra firma. And this is exactly what I noticed, that we have such a landlocked history of Sindh. So Sur Samundi also actually brought back to me that history, which in some sense we have been amnesiac about.
Mm-hmm. I'd just like to also mention something about just, I guess, what is history and what gets documented as history. what gets noticed and what gets not noticed. And for me, it was very moving and surprising even. You know, I remember doing that Zoom interview with Saif, Prashant.
Yeah.
And he suddenly is telling us this
Yes.
contemporary take on Sur Samudi. And I was taken aback with the, I don't know what the word for it is, the frankness, the courage of vulnerability that Saif is showing. In a sense, is that the, I don't know what the right word for it is. When he says that for us, in a contemporary sense, Sur Samudi is about those who left and went to India. He's revealing so much. He's not, I don't know.
Yeah.
How did you respond to that?
I think it's almost, you rightly said, it's the courage of vulnerability, but it's very strange that it is so rare that it often comes to us, our bodies, almost as an unexpected sort of shock. And your eyes will start. I mean, I remember, first time I heard that, like I immediately got goosebumps and my eyes went moist in that sense, and it hadn't even unfurled. It was just that thought that that today we think of Samudi, and we have been thinking about people going by the sea, separation, and suddenly something very what should be obvious, right? Like, I mean, we are talking about a Sindhi poet. There is a history, but it's suddenly these things are not spoken about in that sense. We speak about partition also in a particularly historical manner of checks and balances and rights and wrongs, in that sense, which are important as sort of reminders. But there is also there's a deep emotional history to this whole story, and the emotional history of it is perhaps embedded in these poems, and it's only by rereading, re-speaking, uttering it again and again, re-singing and uttering it in perhaps new ways and finding new relationships, which poetry always allows, because it is first of all such an abstract relationship of word and meaning, that it is such a startling thing at some points to realize that uh, these connections can be made, and they are in fact very real, because otherwise we won't be responding to it in the same visceral manner as we do.
I'm remembering Doha by Kabir. I'm looping it in. Let's see what meaning it makes for this moment. He says, Sara Sura Bahu Mile, Ghayal Mile na koi. Okay. Sara Sura meaning, all these brave warriors with proud chests and warrior-like smiles and all the successes. Huh? Sara Sura, Bahu Mile, superheroes. You meet lots of them. Ghayal Mile na koi. You don't meet any wounded ones. घायल को घायल मिले तो राम भक्ति दृढ़ होए. So interesting. When one wounded meets another, when one who has the courage of vulnerability to reveal the hurts that these divides cause, when that vulnerable, courageous, vulnerable one meets another courageous, vulnerable one, when one wounded meets another, to Ram Bhakti Drid Hoy. That is true spirituality. That is true love. Bhakti is love also. Love is not possible unless you're able to reveal self. And I think that's somewhere where Saif's interview takes this film, which for me is the most precious part of this film, that it moves into that space that we need to speak about, that these borders bewilder and they hurt us. And he is speaking about healing, healing all kinds of divides. So to me, that's the most precious part of this contemporary take that emerges on Sur Samudi, really.
I mean, if I could sort of loop in a little story, for instance, GM Syed, right, in very iconic figure in Sindh, very important figure in its politics, who at a certain point actually felt that the Haris, the cultivators in Sindh, and many people had been exploited a lot by Sindhi Hindus and so on, and becomes a part of the Muslim League and the Pakistan resolution and so forth. And then years later realizes that the community of people that Sindh lost, Sindhi Hindus who went away, that they were the ones whom they shared with the most. And this particular loss or this vulnerability there's a lovely story about how when he meets this writer Keert Babani in Bombay, and then he says that I feel कि मेरे हाथ खून से रंगे हुए हैं, because I was part of that thinking. So this idea that these are people we lost and that this is their rightful home and that they can come back, it's experienced by a lot of people in Sindh. The kind of warmth, जंहिंखे असां सिंधीअ में सिक चवंदा आहियूं, the sikka with which, the love with which they will say that, no, this is your home and this is where you should come back. Or for instance, sometimes I'm told by, Sindhi writers and academics over there, oh, we lost people like her. She could have easily been on this side of the border. So it's you're quite right. I think the disarming honesty with which this emotion is expressed is actually quite special. It's not to be encountered in any other partition narrative.
And I think maybe we can end today's little conversation with this invocation, even, or a prayer that more and more of our public discourse will have the courage of vulnerability, the courage of the poetic rather than the prosaic. And I think more such acts or expressions of revealing the self, revealing the trembling core of hurts, rather than just strutting egos, will, I think, call upon a higher self that we are all capable of. I mean, sorry if this sounds moralistic, but really, there is a part of us that, as human beings, that is territorial, that is clannish, that seeks to be groupy, and secure our insecure selves through that, and literally like piss on our territories like dogs do. That's what we do. That's what mostly politics is. And then there is another part of us that is able to hear another call across the shore of that fettered small self. We are able to hear that larger self that we are all capable of, that we all are. And I think when such moments come, when people reveal themselves, they are seeking to touch that larger self, which I think is what Shah Latif would be happy about. So thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant, for this.
Yeah.
And thank you, Sindhi Culture Foundation and Aruna for giving us this opportunity to chat about this sur and this film.
अजब उतर पार दे ताड़े की तवार अजब उतर पार दे ताड़े की तवार हारन हर संभारा मुझा सरया ता संकार अजब मुझे यार वसन गावे सकिया अजब उतर पार दे ओ अजब उतर पार दे ककर तो कार करे अजब उतर पार दे ककर तो कार करे वसे तो वड पुड़ियो कालक खंड भरे विजण निशान वरे मुझ सकार सुख दिए हो तो के सिंधड़ी सारे के सिंधड़ी सारे